Now there's the question, who's gonna say hello? Because it's three of us again in the next episode in Cardamom and Chili. But I guess I answered that question, didn't I?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
So, hello everyone, welcome. We do have a very special guest today, someone who helped us greatly behind the scenes. So it's a really great pleasure to welcome you to our podcast.
Hi, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's very nice to be here.
Hello. I'm so happy.
Shall we actually introduce our guest, maybe?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. The reason we are struggling, and I'm gonna tell that. I'm actually gonna tell that because it's a very, very, very great person, but we're struggling with the pronunciation of the name. That's why we're trying not to. So
Especially me.
and we've learned before we came to the air. So it's I'll try. I'll do José.
Yeah, that's very close, yes.
Yes.
José. Oh God. It's so difficult. Why is this so difficult?
Foreign names are always weird. It's totally okay.
Especially for the other foreign people speaking English in the foreign country far, far away. That's actually quite great because we also can bring you, the listeners, a little bit of Portugal.
Yes.
To our lovely Scotland, and not only, because we don't really know where are you in the world listening to us. So a little bit about our guest. Maybe actually you can introduce yourself and tell our listeners what are you do excluding helping us a lot.
Yeah. So just so that everybody has a good idea on the pronunciation, I'm José Machado. I'm an audio edit and a sound designer, mostly working for video games and animations, but I also work on movies, on more corporate type videos, and also on podcasts, very much like the one you're listening to right now.
But there's much more to you.
Yeah.
Tell us of your latest endeavor and what you've been doing, because I find this absolutely fascinating.
So I've also recently been teaching. I've been teaching in the degree that I used to work, what's the word?
Study?
Yes, thank you. This is just going to be a podcast of the three of us trying to remember words in English, isn't it? But yeah, I'm currently teaching also at the degree that I used to study at.
Brilliant. And we had a quite interesting topic for today as well, excluding just, trying to find the words. Shall we move swiftly to that one, Heike?
Yes, the question we want to explore today is how you know what you want to do in your business when you have a very varied background. That's how I understood it. That's right, isn't it, Josie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually brought the topic for discussion today because I'm currently essentially in the arts field, in the entertainment field, but I have a very weird background of how I reached here and how I reached the conclusion that, no, this is actually what I want to do for the rest of my life, or at least for the next couple of years. And I think it's important for people to also think about that because, at least in the groups that I've been, people tend to fixate a lot on just a path on life. And I think it's important for us to also remember that there are other paths that we can take. So initially, when I was in school, when I was in the normal basic school before going to college, we have 12 years of school here in Portugal. And from the 10th grade to the 12th grade, we have to essentially choose more or less the type of things that interest us between like sciences, humanities, arts, those sort of things. And at the time, I was very, very into the sciences. I took biology, I took a little bit of psychology, I took chemistry. It was very much those like hard sciences, and not so hard sciences because psychology, but those sort of mentality. And my dream at the time was working in a lab, was working on research projects and stuff like that. I actually had a cousin of mine who is a bioengineer who showed me around her lab and like took me a few times with her just to see basically what she was doing day to day. And it was really interesting for me at the time. It was something that really captivated me. And so I was like, oh, I want to be working in this sort of environment. And then, after the 12 years, I had a good enough grade to enter university in biochemistry. And I was very happy for like about a couple of months, essentially. When I actually started, doing lab work day to day, when I was essentially like every day I had classes that were either in lab or working related to that, I actually found myself, it was still interesting topics that I was exploring, but it wasn't really right for me. Like on the long term, I asked myself a lot of time, do I see myself doing this for the next 40 years of my career? And I was like, not really. Okay, scale it down. Do you see yourself doing this for the next 10? Also not really. Okay, for the next 5? Okay, do you see yourself doing this by the end of the year? No, I'm not really having fun. It's not something that's bringing me any sort of like fulfillment to my life,
Inspiration.
Exactly.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I have to quit. I have to find something else. Obviously, if this isn't working, the main thing was that I didn't want to feel stuck for the rest of my life, essentially. And I very much felt like if I continued down that path, I wouldn't really have a way to turn back. And that's not true at all, for multiple reasons. For example, I'm still very good friends with the people I met in biochemistry, and one of them is now a doctor. She completed her education on biochemistry and just said, nope, I'm actually going to also take a doctorate in medicine. So she just switched careers like after finishing it. Even if I had continued there, it would still be chances to move out. But at the time, I was very much like, no, I have to find something else. I can't be here. And at the time, a friend of mine from school, from before we went to university, was actually taking a games degree, a game development degree, essentially, here in Portugal. And that sounded really fun because, I've been a nerd since I was very young. Games were always like, not necessarily the main form of entertainment for me, but a very close call. I always liked being entertained. It's a thing, especially in Portuguese, that people think where like being entertained means seeing happy media, and doesn't really mean that. It's just a way to pass the time and you feeling, glad that you did it.
Satisfied?
Exactly, yes.
Satisfied.
That's a great word to put it. And I was like, I think I want to try that, since I wasn't really sure what to do at the time. I was very, very lost. And the degree was a very generalist degree. So it touched on a lot of things in game development. I was like, oh, that seems perfect. I get to explore multiple areas and then kind of figure out where I actually want to be. But when I actually started the new degree, I was very scared that taking that leap of like, no, I've quitted this first year of biochemistry. I completed the first year, but then I just quit and I was taking on something new. And it was very scary doing that transition because I was like, what if I don't like it here? What if this is also not for me? What do I do now? And over time, not even over time, like we started the semesters here in Portugal at about September, early October. And I think it was in November, we had a small game jam that was organized just by the students. A game jam, for those who don't know, is essentially you spend usually 48 hours, sometimes more, sometimes less, depends. But generally 48 hours with a team developing a game. And I was like, first year, we had like 3 months of classes, and me and a couple of friends were like, hell yeah, if we're in the degree to make games, let's make a game. And I actually got in with some older students and they helped us quite a bit. And in those 48 hours, I was like, I absolutely see myself doing this for the next 100 years, And it was such a good feeling to just have that click of like, oh, okay, I found the path that I actually want to do. But it was still very, very open because, again, it was a generalist degree for making games. And so it was still like you had art, you had design, you had programming, you had audio, you had a lot of things. And during the degree, during the 3 years that we have here, I actually tried to narrow it down, essentially. Like, what's between all of this that I actually like?
The most,
And
yeah.
yeah. And I was essentially like, okay, I really like programming. I really like audio. For now, I'm going to try to just see what I can do with those. I eventually left the degree. I worked for about a year, essentially doing both, doing a little bit of programming, doing a little bit of audio, doing a little bit of like tech art stuff. And by the end of that, about a year of working, I was like, I don't really like programming. It's not really bringing me joy. It's not really bringing me satisfaction. And I was like, but I'm in the field that I want. I really want to do games, but I don't want to be programming all the time. And I had the same conversation with myself. Do I see myself doing this for 40 years? No. Okay, how about 10? No. Okay, how about 5? Maybe 5. Okay, so it's not a hard line. It wasn't the same as it was during my biochemistry years. And I tried to think, if that's the case, what can I do to explore other areas? What can I do to just maybe focus in a little bit more on audio? And I eventually found a master's degree in audio. It was a master's degree in arts and technologies of audio. And so it did give me that tie-in between the technology side of the programming and also just of straight up audio. Eventually, I did the master's. It took me 2 years. I came out fully like, I really want to work in audio. And work in audio on the entertainment field, on games, on movies, on animations. That's what I want to do. At least for the foreseeable future, that's how I'm feeling. But if I ever come across a point where I start feeling like this maybe isn't really doing it for me anymore, I now also have the resilience to just say, okay, what else is there? And I feel like people sometimes like that. For example, I've heard Heike talk on this podcast about how she had a business before who wasn't really working. And it took her also a little bit of time to just make that leap of like, okay, if this isn't working, let's change it. And I think it's something that people should listen more, especially in the current times. We don't really have anymore the...
It's fluid, really.
Yeah.
There's so much happening. And I actually love your story, but more important, I love your attitude. And I think that makes difference because I myself am a great example to getting stuck and holding to the things that are not working for far too long.
Me too.
But the good thing is that with time, I've learned to letting go quicker and being open to exploration. And you're right, that there's no one path and no definite answer. And that changed. We touched that also in I think that was the last episode or some of the previous episodes. We were talking about that in the generations of our parents or grandparents, that was totally different. Right now, you really can follow your passion and check as you were. That's why I love that. It's like, oh, do I not maybe that?
Like, is this working? Not really. Just move.
Yeah.
But it still depends on the country, to be honest, because in Germany, there's still this weird mindset when your CV has a lot of stuff to show, you're already a candidate which will not be considered. Because in Germany, there's still this mindset that if you are a job jumper, and that can mean that you jump every 2 years or every 3 years, you are unreliable, you will not benefit the company, and therefore you're a bad candidate. It's a very old 90s mindset. And it's fascinating that it is still around, especially nowadays. Because the more you can explore, the more experience you have that you can apply, that you can benefit from, especially as an employer. But what I would like to say is that I think, José, you might be one of the most courageous people because of just doing it and questioning, okay, what am I doing here? And then doing or taking the leap, jumping into the cold water and just changing traction. So it's very courageous to do this and to know and to find where you want to go and then to define it was quite right, but now it isn't, so I change it again.
Yeah, and you say I'm courageous, but that's not really how I see myself. I just feel like I have a very good support network. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for my parents, my friends, saying it's okay for you to change. Especially while I was in biochemistry, I had that mentality of like, no, I had to be here. I took a choice, and now that's what I have to do because that's just how life goes. And it took, even with me feeling really bad about it. Again, I love the people that I met there. I didn't really love the curriculum, essentially. But it took for a lot of people to be like, hey, it's okay for you to do something else. If you're not feeling good here, you don't have to do that, especially in our times, because as Heike said, it also really depends on the country. But I feel like it's not necessarily a country thing, it's a mentality mindset. Because, for example, here in Portugal, we still have that mentality of like, oh, but how do you have those skills? For example, in the games industry, it's not necessarily impossible, but it is somewhat rare that you have a very good career progression inside the same company. Usually, for you to move up in the, let's say, corporate ladder, you essentially have to hop to another studio. And that's essentially how it works. And some companies here in Portugal already understand that, but there are some others that don't. So it's also just very much a cultural thing that's starting to change. And especially, for example, with so many freelance people who are working worldwide now, it's also a lot easier for us to think that you don't really have to work at a company, essentially. You can do your own business, you can do your own things. And if you're doing that, you also don't have to do it only for people inside of your country. For example, most of my jobs are for the outside. I do have a couple of Portuguese clients, but most of them are for the United States or from the UK. I had a couple Spanish clients. I had a French client the other day. And I can do that all from the safety of my home, my studio, my workplace, that it doesn't have to be a company.
That's actually that's what's changing, and I think you touch quite interesting subject that it will change. And I feel like it's gonna be this, let's see what is on the corner mentality, and no, I'm gonna be stuck here and I'm not gonna move mentality. And I guess with what you mentioned also, the bigger companies and what Heike, you were saying about this, you were jumping between things, so therefore we're not gonna have a use for you. I think is exactly a really old-fashioned, squeeze you and use you and use you, something like that. That was like that's a funny Polish saying, like, plus it is really not allowing people to be creative. So because then you sit in the one place, you do like manufacturing, that's the kind of jobs you were going there, you were staying there forever, putting one screw from another side to another side for 30 years. That was it. And people worked like that, I don't know, 100 years ago. Well, some of them still do, but that changed dramatically, as you were saying. But some companies, especially when you're not freelancer, when you won't be employed, because some people do.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's kind of policy of companies trying to own people. Because, if you've got a small amount of skills, you have also less choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. And if you have a broad variety of skills, you could be really useful and headhunted by someone for some point. So why would you?
I would counter this with another mindset that is around the more skills you have, the less good you are at each of them. If you only have one skill, you are the master of it. So that mindset is around as well. And partially, It is
Partially it's
true.
right.
It is right. However, when you have a varied skill set and really hone them, you're as equally or even better than someone who has only one skill.
Yeah.
So there's also this mindset around, and that's one of the reasons where I still kind of think and overthink the whole business idea with your niching down with this and that, because there is a psychology behind it that humans only pick up on so much information, and you need to nail this information. That's why you should be saying in a networking call that you do this thing and not that you do 20 things, because no one will remember that. So it's a very interesting topic actually to figure out how much expertise is there, how much do you promote, how much can you really do, and how valuable is it for yourself and for others.
Well, to me, again, I don't know if you guys are gonna agree with me. That's two different things.
Yeah.
It's a different thing to collecting skills, because you can use that in niching down. It's quite interesting. We can probably record thousands of really interesting podcasts about it. I loved what you said about one thing as well before, and I need to bring this out because that was cool. Because you said that psychology, you put it to the science, and I never really thought about it because for me it's a more humanities and art. That's quite interesting. Again, perception.
Yeah.
It's quite cool.
It makes total sense, and a lot of people don't really see it as a science, but it is, just in the sense that there's a lot of tests that are done, a lot of information that is gathered and that is then studied upon, and that lead us to have different views of the world. So
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I know that, but when you said that in this context, I was like, actually, yeah, it's true.
And I never thought about this. For me,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
was a brain, science. So now you say human, it's like, okay, that's super interesting, because it is both. It is dealing with something intangible, but also something measurable. So
Of course, it is really measurable, actually.
it's not a hard science necessarily, but it is still a science. It's essentially like, again, not what we call like a mathematical science, but it's still studied, and it's still, there's discoveries to be made,
Tested,
tests and things that work with the scientific method. So
yeah, and people are really actually getting crazy about it, because they really think that it's like a woo and stuff and blah blah blah. No, energy is a science.
Yeah.
Quantum physics, that's the science.
Yeah.
All of that. So that's quite cool. But yeah, in this context, particular in this context, you said about this, we're like, yeah, actually, I forgot about it.
And also, picking that up as well, I do think that there is a balance between the two worldviews of, like, if you have a lot of skills, you're just like the common saying of jack of all trades, master of none. But the full saying going, but better than a master of one. You can have a balance between the two ideas of, like, having more than one skill, but not diversifying yourself so much that actually they become independent of one another. You can, for example, if you have one particular skill, a good way for, in my opinion, obviously, a good way for you to attract more clients and try to get a better perspective of the project that you're working on is getting more skills, but skills that relate to that core skill that you have, things that help you. For example, in my case, I essentially had the path the other way around, but I am right now a sound designer who also knows programming, for example. And that's a plus if we're talking about the game development world, because I am right now a sound designer who is also able to implement the sounds and who is able to talk with the development team in better ways to programmatically deal with that. Does that mean that I have to be really good at programming? No, I'm not like a core programmer, but me having those extra skills do put me slightly above the rest of what I'm going to call my competition,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
it doesn't necessarily work like that, especially in arts. It's very much a thing of like, we're all a team trying to elevate each other, or at least that's how I see it. That's not necessarily how everybody sees it, but I feel like that's a better way to approach the world, at least.
No, absolutely.
Well, it's a USP. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so having those extra skills might actually make you more employable, more desired, if you just pay attention to make it not necessarily like a very wide lane of the things that you know, trying to keep it somewhere in the same realm, and then keeping adding things and keeping developing your processes in places that matter to what you want to do. And that's the important part, is what do you want to do?
Absolutely, I agree with that, and I guess that's and what really lights you up, I guess.
Yeah.
Because that's what you were saying with your process and with your choice. Like, do I see myself doing it? Do I enjoy it? The same like with us, like, isn't it? You came up from long, you could also say long story, to the point when you are right. That's cool. I love it. I love that feeling. I know who I am. I deliver that. I love the feeling when my customer, even in 5 minutes, achieve what they can do with 5 years. I can deliver it. But it took you all this journey to get to that point, isn't it?
Yeah. And many belief systems that come from society, from myself, from family, from friends. And I spoke about that I was a truck driver for a while. And you said, Vera, in terms of what I am, that doesn't fit together because where's the marketing part, so to say? And no matter what we learn, we can implement it at any time. And I always had positions in my professional career where I was able to implement anything that I have learned. And especially the last job I had before I came to Scotland, because having been in the forwarding industry, I knew exactly how to plan, to organize, to do all the logistics that I needed for my trade shows that I was managing. The marketing, trade shows, it's marketing. Graphic design, doing the banners, doing the stands, doing all the stuff, taking care of the branding. No matter what I ever learned, I was able to implement it. And also how I started was in a pharmacy, but in a German one, which is completely different from the UK ones. But the biggest part is marketing in there as well. So that was the first part, or when I was 16, oh God, a long time, a very long time ago, I already got this, hook up to marketing, and it stayed all the time. However, that's now the point where it came to the business. I did it because when I started out with my business, I did it because I knew it, because it was something that I did 30 years, or not quite, 27 years. But it didn't fuel me, it didn't bring me joy, but I still did it because I knew it. And you can't drop the skills that you have. Well, you actually can. And now I take all my experiences because of having been so curious all my life, having explored so many different jobs, which were detrimental in the German CV mindset. Okay, why have you been in so many jobs? Why have you done this? This does not fit. But my understanding of the world is so much bigger than many people have it who have been in their job for 40 years and have never looked outside of this.
Yeah. And if I can add just a small point to that as well, I feel that people sometimes also, when they're especially talking about their CVs, when they are that attached to that mentality, sometimes I feel like they fall into a thing of, I have to say everything that I've done. And not necessarily. You can present yourself with just the parts that you want other people to show. Like, for example, I used to be a guitar teacher when I was way younger, like when I was like 16 or so. For about a year or so, I gave guitar lessons. And that is now helping me with my teaching at university, just in the sense that it allows me to better communicate with people. But it's a personal skill I have. However, I don't necessarily put it on my CV because I was a kid teaching essentially other kids how to play. It doesn't really make sense for me to put something that might be detrimental in front of the people who I want to scout me, who I want to work for, because if it's something that it doesn't necessarily work well with the industry that I want to be at, I don't necessarily have to mention it. For example, I talk about biochemistry a lot and openly because I think it's a really nice conversation starter and it really defines how I'm very passionate about this industry. But if it was something that I didn't feel would add anything to my story, I just wouldn't mention it. It's a personal experience. It's skills that I have and skills that are very important for how I deal with my life. But other people don't necessarily have to know that. I have to take them to whatever job I do, but I don't have to necessarily present them if I don't feel comfortable that they would be accepted.
That's a valid point. And I've been told for some point, although my CV is not updated for last, 12 years, I think. But I've been told that basically you a bit tweak your CV. Again, you're reading requirements of your potential, employer or person who addressing your CV, and you're just tweaking and putting your experience relevant to them. And again, I've stopped updating my CV, first of all, because I've started doing freelance jobs. And secondly, because after 2 pages, I was like, no, I'm going to read that. Because again, it's quite a lot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what you were saying, sometimes it's quite cool when you feel it to open or say story about what you've done, because randomly, and that happened to me a few times, randomly people get connected to that. Oh, well, I've done a semester of something similar, blah, blah, blah. Or do you know that? Oh, I've done blah, blah, blah. Oh, are you from Portugal? Oh, I've want to go to Portugal.
Yeah.
I don't know about tracks and Heike. It's a lot of starting conversation and the questions, but that's another story.
For example, your whole conversation with Tom and you and linguistics was a very good example of that. Like, it's not something that you necessarily like put out there just, oh yeah, like I'm a holistic photographer and also I used to do linguistics,
Yeah.
But if it comes up in conversation, I think it's very nice to have that experience to show.
And actually, the conversation with Tom is a great example how that works, because that was already like, "Ooh, I love that idea," and it's just elevating energy in the room, and that can be done everywhere with everyone. If you've got listener and responsive attitude,
Yeah.
and that's where people get together, connect, and start to like each other, and then when business happens, actually, because that's what it is.
It's building the human connection and seeing
Yes.
beyond that.
Yes.
I'm a coach and NLP practitioner and brand specialist, and you're the photographer, and you're our audio genie. So it's beyond that. The way, I'm so sorry, Josie and I connected was via a creative networking group, and then we found ourselves on the Zoom call and playing around with the Zoom avatars because they were not new. For what was it, half an hour, 45 minutes? We couldn't get over it. It was so amazing.
Like, we met at the networking event, and then we were like, oh, you seem really interesting. I would like to connect with you a little bit more. Let's schedule a call. And then it was just like a half an hour call that we had scheduled. And then both of us spent 45 minutes just playing around with the avatars. And it was delightful.
Brilliant.
And that led to all the deeper knowledge of you being in the gaming industry, and then seeing all the stuff that I am a geek. I was born a geek. It's my genes. I am the race geek, I would say. So I was like, oh my God. And, it's so easy to get off on a tangent, positive and negative, when you connect with people on another level.
Well, remember our first call, it's supposed to be an hour and it took, I don't know how long we were talking. And then we ended up with, sharing screen and showing each other, photographs from around Scotland. Because that was the first one. Because she was like, "Oh, have you been there? Oh, have you been there?" And we're just like, "I show you that one." Just, oh my, hours later. Yeah, but that was quite cool. That was our first, after networking. So, yeah, Heike swooping in and hooking you with her charm and knowledge. That's what's happening.
Thank you. You make me blush.
It's very much the thing of like human connection, of mentality on how do you approach those connections. If you're just trying to make yourself seen and trying for people to catch people's attention, people will notice that, and not in the good way. It's better for you to just like approach them, say what you do, talk about your experiences if it's relevant, and then everything else will come up.
Yeah, when you're trying too hard, it's really, really, really noticeable, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, as you were saying, it's just reflect and move on. I think I like that.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with changing. Change is scary. Change is terrifying. But it's also really good. Especially if you're in a bad place, like mentally or in terms of work, in terms of whatever it is. Change it. We have a Portuguese song that's a little bit old now, but it's very well known here. And it basically translates loosely to something like, change your life. If you're not feeling satisfied, just change your life. And that's basically it.
It's a very good option. I think that it's a good point to go and change our lives today.
Try to figure out what are things that are concerning you, that are bothering you. Maybe try to see if there's anything that can be changed about that.
Yeah.
Nice. Wow. All three nodding and being reflective. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that we inspire you to change a bit more.
And follow your dreams. Follow your heart.
Thank you very much, José.
Thank you to both of you as well.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having you on, finally.
It was a pleasure being here.
And officially, thank you again for putting with our nonsense in such a beautiful manner.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Alrighty. So, everyone, enjoy yourself and listen to us in next episodes. Bye.
Bye.